Okay, here we go. Consumer behavior, summer class, chapter 14, our last chapter. It's all about culture. I hope you found that these chapters have been interesting. I know it's been a crazy semester, very condensed, getting through a lot of material, but I'm hoping that this material is relatable not only to your paper, but also to your lives and to your marketing careers. So let's get into culture. So, a culture is a society's personality. Culture is an accumulation of shared meanings, rituals, norms, and traditions. That's a lot, right? Um, it's our society's personality. And there's a thing called culture shock. I'm sure you're aware of it. Maybe you've experienced it. When we are immersed in a different culture and we feel the effects that are much different than our own. So it doesn't mean that it's from country to country. It could mean region to region, something very different. Um, you may have experienced this because you're from a different area of our country or you moved here. Understanding culture. So products can reflect underlying cultural priorities of a particular period of time. So I have a list here. So what do the following products say about our society? So I have a picture of a Swanson TV dinner for the United States. So in the 1950s, when TV dinners came out, they came out because TVs came out and people were not wanting to miss their favorite program. Unlike today, where you can watch something on Netflix or on demand or Hulu or whatever you decide, it was a show was on when it was on, and if you didn't want to miss it, you sat in front of it with your TV table and your TV dinner. And our society was started their love affair with the television. Number two, cosmetics made of natural materials without animal testing. Well, this is an evolution through time that people realized that this was an inhumane um, thing to do to animals to test them for products that we're going to use. So many of you who purchase cosmetics do not favor companies that test on animals. So you've basically banned those companies and you go towards other companies that are all natural and they don't do any testing whatsoever. And I know there's quite a few of them out there. And the third area, pastel carrying cases for condoms. See, if we were doing this in class, we'd have quite the conversation around all this. So typically, a female in the class would raise her hand and say, "Well, why not?" So our society is definitely more laid back about sexuality and a woman's control of her own body. And so now, these days, um, this is not a difficult thing for a female to get her hands on, and it's available. Whereas maybe back in the 50s, when you were eating TV dinners, that was not ever something that would ever be sold or available on the open market. The cultural system consists of these functional areas. So, as we know, a culture continuously evolves, as I just showed you, in the types of products that even have evolved through time. Ecology is the way the system adapts to its habitat, the technology a culture uses to obtain and distributes its resources shapes ecology. So more companies now are sustainable. They don't want to leave a carbon footprint. It is very, uh, it's very typical to find a company that has recycling programs and a way to help out the environment and not harm it. The next area is social structure, the way people maintain an orderly social life, including politics. So that can be anything from rules in the way we drive to the rules, the rules on the road, for example, and keeping our society structured, following rules. And the last area is ideology, mental characteristics of a people, common world views, shared principles of fairness and order. Do unto others as you would want them to do unto you, the golden rule. So there's certain things we know as a society that are fair and shared throughout the world. Be kind to others, and sometimes that doesn't always work out. But that is the three areas: ecology, social structure, and ideology. Culture production system. So, culture production system is a set of individuals and organizations that create and market a cultural product. So, I'm sure have heard of the saying pop culture. Pop culture is popular culture. Things that are in popular culture can be celebrities, they can be objects, they can be services, they could be an influencer, it could be a piece of clothing. So pop culture is something that has different subsystems in it. So if we're talking about culture, we have to talk about popular culture. So there's the creative side of it, the managerial side of it, and then communications. And we'll break this down with an example in just a second. So the creative is that it generates new symbols and products. So pop culture does. It's managed by distribution of new symbols. And thirdly, communication gives meaning to a new product or service. So the example here is we're going to talk about a music release by um, Beyonce. I just said fiance. Beyonce. So number one, she's the singer. Number two, she has Columbia Records behind her. And number three, she has an ad agency that communicates for her. Okay, so the creative is that generates new symbols and products is Beyonce, and maybe, her songs or fashion or whatever it is that she's doing, a dance move or a saying in her song. Number two, her management is Columbia Records. Number three is the communication is her ad agency, and corporations like Pepsi who work with her to arrange appearances like the Super Bowl or whatever, concerts or um, activities she has promoting herself. So where does culture come from? One, it's influenced by inner city teens, hip hop, black urban culture, outsider heroes, anti-oppression messages, and alienation of blacks. And fourth, the flavor on the streets. I like how I have a little chicken there, or turkey, that PowerPoint gave me. So those different areas come together to create culture. So there's different kinds of culture. We talked about highs and lows in the other slides. So high culture is like art and beauty and something that we admire and have an emotional response to, versus a craft product, like you might have heard of a craft beer or craft furniture item like arts and crafts, is admired because of the beauty in which it forms a function. And lastly, there's mass culture, creates products for the masses, which is a lot out there. So higher up means that you're paying more for it, and the lower it is mean low culture is it's available to everyone and it's affordable to everyone. So myths are stories and that express a culture's values, and in modern times, marketing messages convey these values to members of a culture. So you might not know it, we're going to talk about it in some slides ahead, that myths and stories are woven into all kinds of parts of our lives, TV shows, movies, advertising. So I'm going to explain here a little bit of how Dove, as in soap and body wash, their logo is connected back to Greek mythology of Aphrodite, and that she is the goddess of beauty and love. And the dove, that's where it all came from. The company uses this logo and symbol on their soap, and it connects back to a story in mythology of a beautiful Greek goddess. So myths are stories with symbolic elements that represent shared emotions and ideals of a culture. So think about this. Different characteristics you may see in movies, TV shows, advertising. There's always like a conflict between opposing forces. Think like Marvel Comics, Spider-Man. Outcome is the moral guide for people, do the right thing. Our superheroes always do the right thing. A myth reduces anxiety by providing guidelines for us. We kind of know where the story is going to go. They're associated with Greek and Romans. And consumer fairy tales, such as, we love fairy tales. We grew up with fairy tales. Our parents and grandparents read us books. It goes on in a place like Disney, where over 2,000 weddings each year are held, and like a Cinderella wedding with the pumpkin stagecoach and all the bells and whistles that go with what you saw in Cinderella the story. I see that I spelled Cinderella wrong, so I'll have to go back and check that. But the point of the matter is that we have still stories connected back to Disney, and we love myths and stories, and it helps us as marketers as well. Okay, functions of myths. Metaphysical. They help explain origins of existence. So up here I have Goodyear, their logo, and in the center you'll see that there's a golden winged foot. This is for Hermes, the Greek god, and it's used as their logo. Cosmological emphasizes that all components of the universe are part of a single picture. Sociological maintains social order by authorizing a social code to be followed by members, and psychological provide models for personal conduct. Myths abound in modern popular culture. Myths are often found in comic books, movies, holidays, commercials. Monomyths are a myth that is common to many cultures. So I have Spider-Man and Superman, but it might also be like Santa, Christmas, Kris Kringle, someone that comes around the holiday time. Many movies and commercials present characters and plot structures that follow mythic patterns. Many of our consumption activities, including holiday observances, grooming, and gift giving, relate to our rituals. And this also relates to our final field exercise, number 5, where you had to let me know about some of your rituals. So these chapters, I hope, are helping you think about how this consumer behavior leads back to marketing and consumption, and how to get to know the consumer better. So a ritual is a set of multiple and symbolic behaviors that occur in a fixed sequence and that tend to be repeated periodically. Many consumer activities are ritualistic. You may not think that, but things like trips to Starbucks, Sunday brunch, beauty routines or rituals, exercise rituals, and many more. So ritual artifacts are things like birthday candles, a diploma at graduation, rice at a wedding. A ritual script is a sequence in which we use these artifacts. So think about a wedding. Okay, sorry about that delay. So if you look at page 526 in your textbook, it's very interesting to look at the different ritualistic things we do in a wedding and may not even be aware of what the meaning is behind it. So I'm going to talk about a couple things that go on at a wedding. So one is your best man, okay? His original job was to stand next to the couple to be sure the bride wasn't kidnapped during the ceremony. He was chosen because he was best with his sword. Similarly, bridesmaids were instructed to dress similarly to the bride to confuse potential kidnappers and evil spirits. Somehow the custom evolved to design hideous gowns that make the bride look better by comparison these days. Second, tossing of the garter. At one time, the bride and groom were expected to conclude the marriage ceremony and retire immediately to a nearby room to quote unquote close the deal. To make the consummation official, witnesses would crowd around the nuptial bed and hope to grab a lucky piece of the bride's gown as it was ripped from her body. Over time, modesty prevailed, and the guests had to settle for a symbolic piece of her undergarments. And lastly, I'll share with you is called throwing the rice. Rice is a symbol of fertility. This action is supposed to encourage the newlyweds to get busy and start producing offspring. More recently, many couples have replaced rice with butterflies or bubbles or other items because of the false rumor that birds eat the rice and they end up dying because it expands in their stomach. Evidently, this is a myth. So this is an interesting example of rituals that we might not think of all the breakdown of what it actually means. And lastly on this slide is fortress brands. These are brands we use to perform rituals, such as champagne, a brand of champagne, of course, Gatorade, at the end of a game to throw on the coach in celebration of a championship. So this is an example of a fortress brand. Okay, common rituals: grooming, combing our hair, brushing our teeth, gift giving at holiday time and birthdays. Holidays, we have so many rituals. I'm sure you have certain things that you do in your house that are a tradition at holiday time. And then rites of passage are things like Hell Week for fraternities. Holiday rituals, obviously Christmas, baking cookies, carving pumpkins, giving out chocolates at Valentine's Day or Galentine's Day these days. So think about some of your own family holiday traditions. How do they affect your behavior as a consumer? Are you buying certain things for it? Are you spending a certain amount of time on it? Do you gather as a family to do it? So an example would be for my husband's family is the 7 fishes for Christmas Eve. He is Italian. This is a tradition. You have 7 different fishes, and they can come in any shape or size. And of course, I knew nothing about this growing up because I'm Irish. And when I went to his very first Christmas Eve with his family, I was blown away. Not only was the food delicious, but just a lot of work and a lot of cooking and a lot of rituals that go into cleaning the seafood and cleaning the crabs and serving things a certain way and in a certain order. So think about this yourself and, what you have done in the years. Rites of passage. Rituals we perform to mark a change in our social status. Okay, so let's think about you leaving for college or going to college for the first time. This is like a separation from your parents or guardians. Liminality is learning the campus. You come, you're meeting friends, you're learning how to get around. And then the next stage is called aggregation, and it's a return to society with a new status. So now, you're a freshman, you got to know your classes, you got into the groove of college, you go home at Thanksgiving break, so you can, tell everybody around the table, this is my major and this is what I'm doing. The same thing happens when you're getting ready to graduate. This is a change in your social status from one place to another. Gift giving stages. Okay. Gestation is when the giver procures an item. So think about, you're buying something for your mother or your friend. Then the presentation is when you actually gift exchange, and then the reformulation in the stage here is the giver and the receiver redefine their bond. Sometimes it's negative because the recipient feels the gift was inappropriate or inferior. So hopefully that hasn't happened to you, and then you end up regifting. Sacred and profane consumption is our next topic. So sacred consumption involves objects and events that are set apart from normal activities, and they're treated with respect or awe. Like a wedding dress, for instance, is a sacred object in our society. A profane consumption involves a consumer objects and events that are ordinary and everyday, like a work dress. So I'm showing you the difference between a sacred consumption and a profane consumption. Sacralization, you might have heard the word sacrilegious, but sacralization occurs when ordinary objects and events and even people take on a sacred meaning. So I have the example here of like Elvis Presley. People think he's a god, he's long past, but people still act like he's, present. Objectification occurs when we attribute sacred qualities to mundane items through the process like it's called contamination. And this is an example would be the ruby slippers from Dorothy. Okay, they're in the Smithsonian. I think they were stolen at some point. But they have this, we objectify something that's, mundane, and now it has this certain feeling about it to us. Thirdly, collecting. Systematic acquisition of a particular object or set of objects, and we have an emotional connection with them. So I have Beanie Babies here, but some people collect hats, and some people collect shoes and bags, and we kind of, make that collection have a certain, hold it high in our priorities. And kind of sometimes it takes over for some collecting, like they can't stop, or people continue to collect for them. Okay, domains of sacred consumption. Sacred places. This could be mystical, religious, and country heritage such as Stonehenge, Mecca, Ground Zero in New York. These are all sacred places. Sacred people could be celebrities or royalty. Sacred events, athletic events like the Super Bowl, religious ceremonies like a wedding, a baptism. Sacred souvenir icons. So local products could be something regional, like a regional wine. A pictorial image could be something like, we go somewhere and we pick up postcards or we take pictures. A piece of the rock, the example in the book is something like, you're somewhere and you come back with a seashell, or a pebble or something that you have from a vacation. Literal representation could be a mini icon. And markers could be a logo oriented something like a t-shirt. Desacralization is when a sacred item or symbol is removed from its special place and is duplicated in mass quantities. It loses its specialness. It becomes profane. Things like crosses being worn by celebrities, or religious holidays that are now desacralized because, everyone's listening to Christmas music, even if they aren't Christian, or they don't even celebrate it, but it becomes desacralized. The diffusion of innovations. So innovation, as we know, is any product that consumers perceive to be new. And there's lots of ways that companies come out with new products. They have new manufacturing techniques, a new variation on a product, a new way to deliver the product, a new way to package the product. Diffusion of innovation is successful innovation spread throughout the population and at various rates, known as disruptors. So when we hear the word disruptor, it's not something negative, it's something positive. So an example of disruption is when Amazon bought Whole Foods. That disrupted the entire retail industry. Like, what is going on? And they've been successful with it, but it also made other places like Walmart and competition start looking at themselves and maybe being more innovative. So I have an example of a video here that gives you a little more examples of what we mean by diffusion of innovation. And the next slide also explains what we mean by this. So we talk about types of adopters, and you've learned about this in other classes, I'm sure. And it starts with innovators and early adopters, and it's like a bell curve. It goes up and then it goes down. So you can figure out where you fall in as an adopter. So what I mean by an adopter is, are you someone who goes out and purchases something when it initially comes out? Let's talk about like an iPhone or something new and innovative. Are you the first one in line? You have to have the first one. Or do you wait it out a little bit, see what happens, see if the price drops a little bit, and you're like the early majority because you still want to be trendy and you still want to have the latest things. And then you see it goes down on the right side. It starts going down. That's called the late majority. They finally said, oh, this product does work and it could make my life easier. So you get that 34% that buy products then, and then the laggards are the last ones that, you know, they feel like they're left out and they better get it. And I think of iPhones that way, and I also think of like elderly people, especially now with COVID-19. More and more people are getting into technology, whether they like it or not. But I do find that it's usually when there's a decline and they're just figuring out that this could make their life easier. Okay, 3 types of innovation. Think about this in terms of marketing. There's continuous innovation, which companies should be doing all the time. And this is evolutionary rather than revolutionary. So it's products evolving over time because, you know, if products that we like don't come out with something new, maybe a new flavor or a line extension or a new and improved, you know, they need to do something to keep our attention. And that's what most companies do. They're continuously adding flavors and maybe different sizes and different partnerships and things like that with products. Go down the cereal aisle at any grocery store and you will see line extensions that are ridiculous. There's Eggo cereal. I think it looks like a honeycomb. There's a Hershey Kiss cereal. So now you got a candy company that's completely trying to innovate and get into the dry goods cereal area of the store. They just had some terrible flavors. I can't think of the rest of them now, but challenge yourself, entertain yourself the next time you're at the store. That's the same thing for ice cream too. They do a lot of line extensions. You can tell where I am in the grocery store. Dynamically continuous innovation is the second type of innovation. More pronounced, a change to existing products. And I have the example up here on the right is flip-top cans. They're safer and no litter. I think it's Corona that was doing away with the plastic connectors for their 6-packs of cans, and they were doing like they connect them better so that it is more convenient for the customer, easier to carry, and also isn't killing the sea life. This particular innovation was also challenged during COVID-19. We saw many companies get innovative in the very beginning, with what the technology of their um, companies could do differently to get their product to their consumer, whether it was delivery, or maybe you took a distillery and you made that into now a hand sanitizer company. Maybe I told you there was a kilt company and they were into making face masks. So there's a lot of different things that companies were doing, and challenged with, and rose to the occasion, many of them. The last one is called discontinuous innovation. This rarely happens, but these companies are major game changers in the way we live our life. Airplanes, cars, computers, some might even say the Keurig, um, the coffee lovers out there. Okay, prerequisites for successful adoption. So think about products that you've seen that have come out on the market. Have you adopted them? Are they something that you purchase on a regular basis? So number one, innovations need to be compatible with the consumer's lifestyle. Number two, trialability. People are most likely to adopt an innovation if they can experiment with it prior to purchase. So maybe there's a trial size, or maybe there's a sample, or maybe there's something like a money back guarantee or something like that. Complexity, the product has to be easily understood so that you'll choose it over competition. Number four, observability. Innovations that are easily observable and are more likely to spread. Like they give the example in the textbook, and I'm so sorry these are coming back, but a fanny pack, for example, is better than a wallet or a purse, and you can see that on someone because it's right there and it's convenient. Observability to me is more like watching a video of someone using the product, maybe an influencer using the product and kind of backing up the advantages and attributes of that product. And lastly, relative advantage. Okay, the product should offer relative advantages over all their alternatives. If you're not different and you don't have anything unique, a unique selling point, then guess what? I'm not interested. So many people and organizations play a role in the fashion system. Talk about innovation. This creates and communicates symbolic meanings to consumers. So the fashion industry is one of those very innovative and always changing industries. The fashion system includes all of the people and organizations involved in creating symbolic meanings and transferring these meanings to cultural goods. So fashion is a process of social diffusion where some groups adopt a new style. Many of us want to be fashionable, and this motivates us to buy things. And fashion products reflect a culture's artistic tradition and history. And the saying, history repeats itself, absolutely goes along with fashion. Look at bell-bottom jeans. Look at the mom jeans. Look at acid wash jeans. So there's lots of things that repeat itself in fashion. So they always say never throw anything away because it's coming back. Behavioral science perspectives and the models of fashion. So this is in the textbook. I love this ad. It says, isn't it nice to live in a time when women aren't being pushed around so much anymore? This is for maiden form undergarments, bras, and this is through the time what fashion was. It was either, big hips or bustiers or cinching yourself up at the waist. So psychologically, we can form, it's an expression of our personal style at fashion. Economically, we know that if something's scarce or rare, that it has more prestige, whether it be like a kind of watch or a certain type of garment. Sociological subcultures adopt fashion and its diffusion. So the example I give is something like grunge, or like, that kind of had its way through fashion of, flannel shirts and ripped jeans, and I don't really comb my hair. Medical or meme theory is a phrase or a picture that goes viral. Fashion follows cycles and reflects our cultural dynamics. So, I don't go past 1980 here, but you can see that, we're wearing long skirts. And then you get into the 60s when, there's more women's rights and the skirts are coming up higher. Guess what? We don't have to wear skirts anymore. We can wear pantsuits and business suits. So, and power suits. But it does reflect the cultural dynamics going on of, covering up or, wearing certain things that are appropriate for the time. Cycles of fashion adoption. So there's an acceptance cycle, somewhat like innovation, the way we identify different classes of fashion with regard to their length of acceptance. So there's classic fashion, that's like classic black suit. It is a long acceptance cycle. Maybe polka dots or uh, a white dress shirt. This is classic fashion that won't go out of style. Fads, no meaningful function. They spread impulsively. They diffuse rapidly. They gain quick acceptance, but then they die out. So I'm sure you can think of fads out there. Maybe it will be TikTok. We don't know. But I have this picture of these sunglasses. I'm not really sure what these glasses were about, but I'm sure they were selling them at every Spencer's and Boardwalk boutique, and people were buying them, and then, they're ridiculous. A pet rock might also fall into this category. Same kind of thing here, giving you a chart of what this looks like. A fad dies out, fashion, goes up and down, and then classic just keeps going up. And, that's why we do buy certain types of clothes, especially when you're going to interview, because, fashion's expensive and you want to buy something that's going to last. And then you could change it up a little bit with like, a basic suit, but you could change up a tie, whether it's a skinny tie or a fat tie or, a larger knot or, knit, or the material's different. Like there was thin leather ties back with punk rock. So this is the kind of fashion I'm talking about. Global consumer culture. What drives consumers in other cultures? So there's global consumer culture that unites consumers around the world with common devotion to brand names, consumer goods. It could be movie stars, celebrities, or leisurely activities. So soccer is one of them. I have McDonald's here. The Golden Arches, very much accepted worldwide. Certain celebrities that, defy where you live in this world, movie stars. Products that succeed in one culture, we know, may fail in another, and marketers need to understand the differences among consumers in each place. Many blunders, as we talked about in the last couple of PowerPoints, have been made through marketing history, but now niche agencies are handling cultural differences. It may be language barriers, it could be different nuances that can be insulting to a culture if you don't get it right. So an example of a company like Coke decided that, if you can't let's not ignore something that's popular in a culture. So in the West, we're the net exporter of popular things in the world, and creolization occurs when foreign influences integrate with local meaning. So something locally can now collaborate with something that's global. So the example here is Nativa, and rather than ignore this global characteristic, Coke decided to be strategic with it, and they launched Nativa in Argentina, and it's flavored with the country's traditional yerba mate or mate, this herbal tea that's very popular in Argentina, and they're very successful with it. Check it out. Maybe you have actually had it. But a lot of companies do this. They take something that's local and regional and blend it so that they can capture that market rather than ignoring it. Adopt a standardization strategy. So Um, Disney is a great example. They've gone to Europe, they've gone all over, and they've learned some lessons. So, edict perspective is that there's commonalities across cultures. So, for example, teenage girls have concerns and questions about puberty, or teenagers in general. Why are we just saying girls? Um, Emic perspective, it stresses variations across cultures. Each country has a national character and distinctive set of behaviors and personalities. And Euro Disney found that out the hard way when they did not incorporate certain things into their parks like they do in America. And so they learned the hard way and they fixed it, and now they're much more successful. So this is our last slide. The interesting thing is about this slide, and there's also a YouTube video to get a little more information. If you are working with a company that works internationally or globally, it's important to understand the nuances and the cultures that you're entering. Not everybody is open like we are here in America, and you don't want to insult anyone. And so it's good to learn a culture and understand cross-cultural values. So this Hofstede is a scientist who analyzes the different dimensions across cultures, and he has 6 different dimensions. Some people say there's 4, some people say there's 5, but now there's 6. So the first area here is called power distance. And in our society, you can be friendly maybe with your boss or someone in power. Whereas in other countries, if someone's your boss, they're kind of like off limits, and, they're up on a pedestal and you're doing your job down below. But it's important to understand, if you're working with a particular culture, what that distance is. Individualism here on the right side, degree to which individuals are integrated into groups. A lot of cultures work in teams, and it's not all about the individual. In America, we're kind of a me society, so it's important to understand what kind of a value system you're working in, so that you're not offending people and thinking it's all about you when you should be working as a team. The next area down here is masculinity or femininity. The distribution of roles in society, how they work with gender, and if they think that gender roles are important or unequal, and that women have a certain place. I know when my husband traveled to Saudi Arabia, women were not even allowed in the same room, and if they were definitely covered up. They had to have a divider in between the rooms, so that's a big culture shock right there. Uncertainty avoidance, tolerance for uncertain, ambiguity, or risks. So some companies or cultures are very much risk averse. So they don't want to get into risky situations or risky products and services. Whereas other companies are more, and cultures are more open to that. The next area here is long-term orientation and short-term orientation. In some societies, you have to build a relationship before you just jump right into doing business with them. They want to build a rapport. They want to build a relationship. They want to build trust. Whereas maybe in America, we're kind of about shaking a hand and nodding a head and signing a contract and let's go. But in long term, you have to respect certain traditions and values in a culture. And then indulgence versus restraint. Does a society allow free gratification, enjoying life? Certainly different cultures work differently, kind of like keep your head down, work hard, and we don't do a lot of fun, kind of touchy-feely things, whereas maybe in America we have a little more, understanding of organizational development and making people feel accepted and valued. So again, Hofstede has a these understanding of these values is really important, especially if you are working internationally. I know some of these students taking this class are international students, so I'm hoping some of this kind of clicks with you and makes sense. But I do have this video here I want you to take a look at. I always like a video to show you guys something a little more concrete so you get it. This is our last slide in our last chapter. So good luck on your quiz, chapters 8 through 14, number 2, quiz number 2, and feel free to reach out to me with any kinds of questions that you have.